Welcome to Watching the Throne, a lyrical analysis of Kanye West. My name's Chris Lambert, and today we have a StorYe with Ali Graham. Ali, thanks for being here. Introduce yourself to everyone.
Thanks for having me, Chris. My name's Ali Graham. I also go by the Instagram and Twitter handle of @Lil_Ye, for the reason that I generally, for the last 5 years, have been drawing a little baby cartoon inspired by Mr. Kanye West, and yeah, so I've been doing hip hop illustration or hip hop inspired illustration for getting on six years now, and yeah, amongst my subject matter, the majority of that time has been Kanye.
Ooh, do you remember who your first, as we were talking just before the show about memory and time frames, do you remember who your first hip hop drawing was?
I guess, well, weirdly enough, I was going back through my archives years and years ago, because I used to make webcomics as a teenager, and I had actually drawn Kanye back in 2005, maybe, I don't know. As I say, not great with dates, but sort of way back when. And then I sort of compared him to an image I drew sort of 10 years later, and not a lot had changed. But yeah, I guess my big breakout project was based on Jay-Z, and it was called 99 Problems. So I decided to do a daily project illustrating sort of lyrically based problems and human mundane based problems, and sort of put a little cartoon rapper loosely based on Jay-Z. And obviously with his collaborations with Kanye, he would make an appearance, and sort of from that, those particular images did particularly well, because obviously this was sort of quite fresh off the Watch the Throne era, I guess. So yeah, kind of that spun out, and I wanted to do a project specifically inspired by Kanye, and that's sort of where the idea of Lil Ye came from.
So you were I'm taking you were a hip hop fan leading up to the Jay-Z drawings, or was it just the idea of 99 Problems and having Jay-Z be in these different situations was too amusing to pass up?
I think I hesitate to say I was a hip hop fan. I've always been a fan of music, and I love hip hop for the sort of lyrics and the stories and the characters and the sort of heroes, villains, and all that sort of narrative. But I think I was aware of Jay-Z, and I think 99 Problems just started playing on shuffle on my iPod, and it sprung the idea. I was like, oh, wonder what those 99 problems would be. And then as a result, I had to really dig into his music to kind of mine for lyrics to sort of do a funny spin on. So it was sort of a cyclical thing. So I had an interest, and then had to get more into it. I went deeper into it, grew a much bigger appreciation for a lot of the deeper cuts, because I just sort of basically listened to his whole discography sort of front to end, just listening out for interesting visual lines, and obviously Kanye features in that quite a lot. So yeah, I think doing these projects has made me much more of a hip hop fan, and much more of an appreciator of the culture, and sort of following it much more closely than I would have in the past. I think it was more of a peripheral appreciation, but now it's kind of my job, so I feel I need to sort of invest more time in it and learn more about it, and sort of gather more of an appreciation as a result.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. That's a similar trajectory with myself, and I'm sure with Travis too, with Kanye, in that we were Kanye fans, but I don't think it was to the degree that it ended up being once we started the podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like once you start going in that hard on somebody's like music and really respecting it and appreciating it, having that deeper bond with it, things just grow from there.
Absolutely. And it becomes quite a sort of symbiotic relationship, and like it's obviously it's comparably tougher these days to be a sort of out and out Kanye fan in the general public, but obviously when you understand his music, when you understand his personality and his journey and all the subtlety and nuances, you have this sort of relationship with him, with his music, and this world that he's created. And I think it softens those hard edges where most people, sort of looking at it from a bird's eye view, they can sort of give quite like black and white, right, wrong, binary answers. Whereas I think the more you live with anything, you see those shades of grey in between.
That was one of the things, like, as we're recording this, it's the day that the Kanye and Letterman interview came out.
Yeah.
And that was my big reaction to that interview, is that so many people just see the tweets from Kanye or they see the headline and they judge him based on whatever tone or intent they take away from that. When you just watch this interview with Letterman and you get to exist with Kanye as a person for an hour in a way that you don't typically, it really feels much different than just the headlines or a random tweet. Like, just from the body language, like the smiles, the tone in his voice, there's so much more to where you're like, yeah, why would anybody think any different about him or think that he's not the same person that he was before? There was just a humanity about it that I feel like is lacking in so many other realms.
Well, yeah, humans are built to empathize when looking at people in the eye, looking at their facial features. And the problem with the internet and sort of soundbite culture is everyone's so quick to make this decision, to say, this is right, this is wrong, I think this, I think that. And yeah, you do forget the humanity behind everything. And I think seeing long form interviews, seeing people visually vulnerable, you can't help but sort of soften to it. And I think it's important. And obviously I don't know exactly when it was filmed, because obviously he's got his blonde hair at the time.
I believe it was January 14th.
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting one, because I guess it is slightly rehashing the controversy of that time, when it feels like a lot's changed in between. If you have been sort of following along, I don't know, it feels like it's always changing. And yeah, I mean, I've never felt comfortable speaking on anyone else's controversies, because and especially to do with sort of American politics, it's a tricky sort of place to exist as someone who, it affects me in the sense that the UK absorbs so much of America's culture and its news and everything else, but it is such a different place. Having travelled around certain places in America, it really does show culturally, sort of the ethos and just the people. I feel like the only thing we actually share is the language, because we're so different otherwise. But I think the assumption is, if you speak English, you have to think in this way or that way, and you have the same turmoils or you have the same struggles. And I think America is like, it umbrellas so much that I think, you almost feel unqualified to speak on it unless you have to experience it firsthand.
That reminds me of something Kanye was saying in the interview, where he talked about going to China and that it was very, very, very different from how media had portrayed it.
Yeah.
And the people were different, and it was just something when you experienced it, you saw this dichotomy between how it's presented to you in your own country versus what it's like to actually be in that country. And he's experienced that when he's gone to France, Italy, UK, etc., which it seems to be what you're saying as well, that there's just a much different concept of the United States that you're taken when you're just in the UK versus having gone and traveled and experienced the United States.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's the same anywhere. Like, everyone's outward looking and everyone sort of buys into stereotypes unless something gets proven to the contrary. And yeah, you do have to see the world, you have to experience it for yourself if you possibly can. And I think it grows you as a person hugely to sort of see it face to face and try and kind of not necessarily just accept what you're told, what you're taught. Because I recently went to China and Russia, actually, and both places were so drastically different from anything I could have imagined, because obviously you've got your movies, you've got your sort of the villains and this general sort of stigma against both those places, but they're both just full of normal people getting on with things. And yeah, I think it's just that lack of understanding, and I understand that frustration, I guess, because he's obviously quite well traveled and he's well versed in what he's interested in, but obviously, yeah, having those conversations with other people, it's not as easy, and it can feel quite alienating in a kind of weird way. Like, I am kind of the only Kanye West fan I know, so I haven't really got anyone to talk to about the sort of day in, day out thing. Like, people I know and my friends, they're like, oh, cool, you draw cartoons of Kanye West, that's interesting, so what's your real job? But yeah, it's a funny one. And yeah, I think coming back to sort of the cultural differences and how I think in America that hip hop is so entrenched in pop culture now, and it was very formative for a lot of people. Whereas I think for me, I came to the table quite late, so I feel I'm a little bit set back from it all. I don't live and breathe it in that way, so it's disappointing if certain people do certain things or say certain things, but it doesn't break who I am. I'm not defined by that thing. And I think that's what I think quite a few people are struggling with. And that's where the sort of sense of betrayal or sense of sort of being let down comes from. So I think, again, I feel like in quite a privileged position to be that sort of step back and kind of say, yeah, I enjoy the music and I can stay here and just enjoy the music and kind of, yeah, exist in quite a safe space.
Yeah, there's a whole conversation about American identification with celebrity, and that cultural shift to that's happened over the last, 50 years of escalating identification, especially on social media and the ups and downs and reactions to that would be interesting at some point.
Yeah, I mean, it's a big conversation, and I'm sure. Yeah, again, I am highly unqualified to be having any sort of big conversations like that.
You mentioned being a Kanye fan without like anybody else in your circle really being a Kanye fan. I feel like that's an experience for a lot of Kanye fans, which is funny given that he's such a popular artist. Yeah. And well-regarded artist, where you go online, like the Kanye subreddit's the largest subreddit for a musician. The Twitter accounts and everything, just his career and the reactions that he gets when he has concerts and shows. You'd imagine it wouldn't be such a hard thing to find other Kanye fans. But when you first, were doing the Jay-Z project and started bringing in and incorporating Kanye more, Do you remember when you first started kind of listening to his music, or when you first decided to put on a Kanye album, and what that experience was like?
I think I toyed with his music for years. Like I remember, I think I bought a late registration poster for university just to look cool. I hadn't actually listened to the album. I just knew that it was perceived to be a cool thing to know about. And yeah, obviously, you know, he has his smash hits that have sort of penetrated more than just sort of hip hop circles, and you know, you've got your Gold Diggers, you've got your Strongers, you got, you know, those massive worldwide hits that they just sort of filter in. They're on the radio, they're on adverts and that sort of thing. So it was always there, but I think digging into it, I guess the transition was through Watch the Throne and kind of listening to that collaboration and sort of hearing his voice and hearing all the sort of production. And I love soul and sort of that kind of sound, and obviously sort of that's a really good lead into his older stuff. And yeah, I just sort of sit and consume it, just, you know, let Spotify just roll through all his stuff. And I think, yeah, it's a different kind of listening when you're trying to find something in it as well. So you're it's not just background noise. You're actually sort of, it's like, I guess, reading a book, or rather than watching the movie, it's much more of an active participation in the music. And I think the more you listen to it, the more you sort of build this muscle memory, and you just keep sort of pulling away the layers. And yeah, I think my perception of him in the peripherals was, oh, here's this guy that, you know, he sort of acts out in public, he storms stages, he's got some good tracks, but, you know, he's kind of like, yeah, I can take him or leave him. But, and then I think you can't argue with the music, though. I think once you sort of give into it and actually dig into it, it's undeniable. And it's fun because my girlfriend, who helped me do the music on the Lil Ye Land game, she's not a fan, but because she had to listen to the music in order to recompose it in sort of a 16-bit style, she built this massive appreciation. And yeah, I'll walk past her room and she'll just be listening to it like independently now. So I think it's not necessarily whether you like him or not, it's whether you've listened to him enough.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I talk a lot about it on the show, but I've talked a lot to friends and to my wife about the levels of being a Kanye fan. And it seems like there's like level 0 where you don't like Kanye or his music, and that's mostly because you haven't listened to his music. Mm-hmm. And then there's level 1 where you don't like him, but you like his music. And then level 2 where you're neutral on him and like his music. And then finally level 3 where you're just like, oh yeah, Kanye's a great person and I love his music.
I think it's you have to, yeah, you have to kind of properly get amongst it to get that full appreciation. You have to kind of immerse yourself, and with that you have to be aware of a bit of history, a bit of circumstance, and sort of know the backstory behind a lot of the music, because yeah, otherwise you might, it can wash over you on on a surface level. But I think it's something I like to do in my images, is you may have quite an obvious bit of wordplay, but within the image you can bury some Easter eggs for people that will know it and appreciate it. And I think I think it's sort of known as that kind of audience gratification, where if you can make people feel smart and knowing about a certain thing, they'll enjoy it more.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, yeah, it's so rich, it's so visual, it's so sort of packed out. You can deconstruct it, and obviously you do deconstruct it to a microscopic level, which tip my cap to that, because that's I don't know what level that is. I think it's about level 24 in your levels. But yeah, but listening to your podcast is so enjoyable, because it does, again, it just sort of, you hear this insight, and then you kind of go like, oh, I thought that, or it brings something brand new to it, and or I've sat there sort of going like, but what about this? You haven't mentioned this. Just sort of shouting at my computer. But obviously, yeah, you guys definitely do a great job of digging in.
If you have a list of what about this moments, please send it, and we'll do a whole episode, because I'm sure there are other people that are just like, yes, why didn't they talk about that?
I mean, you can't. You like that. Yeah, it's an infinite battle, and obviously, the new stuff sort of it can fold back into the old stuff, and you can pull references later on. And I like artists like Kanye West, because it feels like, well, he's said himself that he knew exactly what his albums were going to be like ahead of time, and you're sort of spinning out this story, and you're leaving these clues, and you can sort of throw in these winks and nudges to the people that have been paying attention. And yeah, I just love content like that. I love shows like Arrested Development, where the kind of meta and nuanced stuff that, yeah, it's you have to watch it in order to really get it, and in the same way you have to really listen to it in order to get the whole thing.
Yeah, that active engagement really does make a difference, because there's some parts of Kanye's discography where I think if you're just looking for the passive enjoyment from it, which we all do that with different forms of entertainment, there's some that might not be as interesting, where when you switch to the active engagement and start looking for the connections and the depth and the nuance, it can be much more enjoyable than some of the passive, the ones that are more highlights in the passive experience.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, you need the balance. You need to be able to just sort of zone out to something and not be sort of racking your brain as to its meaning. And I guess that's why certain music exists for certain situations. And I have to be in certain moods for certain types of music. And yeah, I think that's just a sort of, it's a healthy balance in what humans need in order to sort of engage or relax or sort of, yeah, concentrate.
One thing I'm kind of interested about, in the detail you had to go into Jay-Z and the detail you had to go into Kanye for each of these projects, and the time that you spent with them, did you feel in studying their work and listening to their work that there were things that you took away and applied to your own approach to art, or the final product, and just how it was going to, I guess, how much did those artists inform your own style, or was there none of that?
I think you can't help but be a product of your environment, and my environment was just that music and their personalities coming through their music. And yeah, you sort of, you pick up these little nuggets of genius in, like, they might flip a line, or have a certain sentiment that you're like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, or I could live by that. And I think both of them have this kind of, I have a lot of respect for any sort of grind and any sort of grind in adversity. So obviously Kanye does speak a lot about his past and how he was seen as just a producer, and and how he had to push through in order to get his vision out there. And I that does inspire me hugely, because most of the work I do is free. Like, I just put it out for other people's enjoyment, and that's its sort of end game. And if someone sees something in it and wants to commission me, that's a great sort of bonus at the end of it. But I think there's something about the desire to create something and care about what you're creating, not necessarily just throw anything at the wall, but you can refine it, you can change it, and you can change your style, you can completely flip things. So I get bored of certain art styles, so I'll just draw in a completely different way. And I know people don't like it as much as the old stuff, because they like the old stuff. And I think there's a lot of parallels with all creativity. And I think, I mean, for me, On to the Next One by Jay-Z is sort of like such a good mantra, in terms of like, if you like my old stuff, go check it out. It's still there, but I'm moving on. I'm moving forward. And, I think that sort of sentiment is, that is almost the Kanye West entire story. It's like, here's this chapter, here's this chapter, here's this chapter. And I think people get too caught up on people need to change, artists need to evolve, and by something new existing, it doesn't devalue the old stuff. So I don't know, I find so much inspiration in what they're about. And I'm kind of the opposite of them, being a nerdy white guy from England. But I think you can always find parallels in humanity and creativity. And I think it's a weird one, and I think it's a universal thing, and that's why they're both such hugely loved and revered characters.
Yeah, very, very much so. And what you're saying about the old and being able to grow or try new things, it reminds me of two interviews that I recently heard. One was Tyler, the Creator, talking after Flower Boy came out with GQ, and he was saying that so many people want him only to make what he had made, or view him as who he was. He's like, I was 19, 20, 21 in that period. I'm 27 now. Like,
I love his new stuff. Like, I want the opposite. I want to see that evolution, because it's so exciting. It's like, it's kind of like, I don't know, you don't want to see the middle-aged bloke in the nightclub. It's just like, you go find your sort of age-appropriate hobbies. But I think I enjoyed Tyler's early stuff in that sort of abrasive, punky way, but in terms of his musical evolution and his sort of his growth and its maturity. But I very much enjoyed Flower Boy, and I really, really like his new one, Igor.
Igor is great. And the second interview was actually Seth Rogen talking about Kanye.
Oh,
and the idea of staying in your lane versus branching out.
Oh, I caught a clip of that, yeah.
It's like, I want Kanye to keep making this amazing music because he's an amazing musician, but then he makes these shoes that I think are really cool and make all this money and have had this huge impact. And there's part of me that when he says he wants to do something else, I'm still like, go make music, which is unfair, but we all kind of have that initial innate thing that we want people to stay in their lane, but we also want them to do more things. And there's always this kind of weird tension there. And that's one of the things, like, I remember when I was scrolling through your Instagram and finding the Kim Kardashian Picasso style break the internet piece, which is very different from, most of the other Lil Ye art, or, the figures that are the other artists that are done in the Lil Ye style, like Wally or Tyler, the Creator. And that's one of my favorite things that you've put out on the accounts. and it's so different. But
Oh,
that can
that's really kind.
yeah, that can be a good thing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's sort of like it's the gym analogy of just working out your arms and skipping leg day, as it were. And yeah, it's that thing is you got to keep all your creative muscles tuned, and you too much repetition it sort of starves a creative mind. You need to be able to explore other styles, other ideas without fear of condemnation. And it is really tricky when you've built an audience off the back of one thing and people have certain expectations, and people are very modular in how they consume stuff, and they go to certain places to get certain things, and it freaks them out if there's something different on a sort of initial level. But obviously, yeah, everyone is adaptable, I think, but because people are very, very short on time, they need sort of certainty, and they need certainty in their content that they create. They don't want to waste the time trying to understand something.
Right, they've understood one thing already, and just
Yeah, exactly. They've invested that time to understand the concept, and you're breaking the rhythm. And yeah, I get that, because yeah, I find that with tons of things. But I think it's there needs to be a bit more room for people to grow and evolve, and that might not be the internet. The problem is you get so addicted to that instant gratification of putting work out and hearing people's comments or seeing the likes. Whereas, yeah, I think something I do really like in Kanye or in Tyler, they go away and they brew and they cook, and they don't put stuff out until it's done. And I really like that. It's not the sort of microwave, throw whatever at the wall. And yeah, I hope that maintains. I hope they can maintain that example, so other creatives don't feel like they have to always be outputting instantaneous stuff, and if they stop for 2 days, the algorithm will kill them, and they'll lose all their followers and therefore their income, and be homeless in a ditch or something. But yeah, it's tough. It's tough making anything when you are faced with this sort of endless appetite. And you can't complain, because if people are seeing and enjoying your stuff, that's amazing. But yeah, it's very hard to keep up.
Yeah, that's it's a luxury at this point to be able to have like 2 years or 3 years to be able to go away and work on something. Just with how fast it feels like the world's moving. But I'm sure that there's an argument that there's also a lot of power there as well. That if everybody else is putting out all these things, like they may get some of the short-term splashes. But then if you're able to go and do the work at the quality and level that somebody's able to do their best work, and then drop that, you hope it's going to make like a big wave rather than a splash.
Yeah, I think the temptation is to make lots of splashes, just purely because who knows what's going to work. And yeah, like you say, it's a luxury, which is kind of reserved for people who have such established fan bases, who will wait, and they'll get a bit salty when you say you're going to drop an album and then don't. But odds are it'll be worth it. And I think people would, if people are honest with themselves, they'd rather the quality over the quantity. But yeah, it's also scary for creatives, because people move on so quickly, and you can become forgotten very, very quickly. So just staying relevant, and that pressure and that treadmill, I think that's what's hurting people. And it serves, obviously there's whole conversations that go into this, the mental state of people because of social media, because of those pressures. And And yeah, fortunately for me, I've sort of existed on the internet from a very young age and have made stuff on the internet from a very young age. So I think I've managed to develop quite thick skin. Whereas, yeah, the prospect of saying, no, I don't think I'll pursue any commercial work right now. I'm going to draw 99 pictures of Jay-Z. I don't know if I could have the confidence to do that now, just purely because you could go viral for a week back when I did that project, whereas you can go viral for 15 minutes to an hour now. And yeah, the impact just it can't sustain in that same way. So I do see the appeal of the little splashes, but yeah, it's exhausting.
Yeah, I imagine it can be, and that's something that I imagine. I know with us, after 5 years of doing the podcast, we have way more Kanye content that we want to do, but there's also other content that we want to do or focus on or spend time on, and it's such a discussion and such a puzzle to try to figure out, like, how much do we invest in these other things and how much do we continue to invest in the main thing.
Yeah.
And what's the proper balance, the proper ratio. I feel like Kanye probably has dealt with a similar thing when it comes to albums versus fashion versus shoes versus all the other projects on his plate, though he has people he can outsource things to, which makes it much easier. But it seems to be like a nice problem to be able to get to, but also one of those ones where, like, what is the right answer, and is there one? You just kind of have to try to do your best and see what happens.
I think that's the best way to live your life, is just do your best. And I think it must be very difficult because, yeah, the bigger you are, the more responsibility you have to deliver world-class material, content, fashion, what have you. And yeah, that must screw with people's brains, and it must just, yeah, it's enough pressure for teenagers to look good in their selfies, let alone in millions of people sort of in your phone saying, give me music, give me shoes, give me this, give me that. And yeah, when you're only one person and one very unique person that has to have so much control and so much say amongst it all, yeah, you do have to kind of pick your battles and probably focus on one thing, because yeah, you'll never get the best result if you keep dotting between those sorts of projects. You need to have the time and the space to focus.
Very well said. Very well said. Actually, a quick change in the conversation got me thinking. You had mentioned earlier before we recorded being at Camp Flog Gnaw.
Yeah.
Was that your first time seeing Kanye in concert?
It was, yeah. I kind of spent the year doing my Kickstarter for the game, and I felt like I deserved a bit of a reward. So I sort of threw down. I was like, right, I'm going to LA, and I decided I wanted to check out Complex Con, and then it happened that Camp Flog Gnaw got announced the weekend after that. I thought, oh, I wonder, could I get tickets to that? And I somehow managed to. And yeah, it was fascinating going to just the event in itself. Like I'd never been to a music festival in the States before, and it's such a completely different vibe from all the sort of muddy festivals I've been to in the UK. And yeah, it was absolutely amazing. Like, and you know, obviously the Kids See Ghosts spectacle, which I don't know whether it was a one-off, but if it was, I feel pretty privileged to have experienced that and been amongst that. Because yeah, it's pretty. It was a tricky one to get my head around, just purely with the whole stage setup. Because I loved being in the crowd seeing it, but it did feel. I don't know if people are aware, they had Cudi and Kanye suspended in a, I guess, perspex box, kind of 50 feet up in the air, performing inside this box. And yeah, it was I feel a little bit conflicted about it, because obviously I think the dream is to see someone like Kanye in, you know, the late orchestration live performance, or some in some sort of environment like that, or maybe like the Sunday service. Whereas when he was in the box, I kind of likened it to going to an aquarium versus swimming with dolphins.
Yeah.
It's like you see them and they're there and they're sort of moving around in front of you, but you don't have that same connection as you might with like a physical live performance out to the crowd. But in terms of a concept, it was amazing to see, and it was a really inventive way of putting on a show. But yeah, part of me was just like, I wish I could just see him in like a fun, intimate space and just get that energy, because it felt like the energy got trapped in the box,
Right.
and the crowd's energy was sort of bouncing off the box.
Yeah,
Still an amazing show.
I imagine it would be much different than like the St. Pablo show, where he was on the floating stage but was there, so it felt much more you didn't have that actual physical barrier between you.
Yeah. But you know, I think it's so easy to just do a standard concert, and I respect anyone bringing something new to the table. And yeah, some things will work and some things not so much, but I think it's, yeah, I like inventiveness. It keeps it fresh.
Was it a bit surreal? I know that Kanye was in the box, so it wasn't quite the experience of him being right there in front of you, but was it still surreal, this guy that you've been drawing for years being there in the flesh?
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, I had a weirdly similar experience while I was doing the 99 Problems project, where I was in Brooklyn on vacation and read some magazine article saying, oh, if you go to this random pizzeria in Brooklyn on a Sunday night, you might catch Beyonce and Jay-Z. And I was like, well, it's Sunday, let's go look. And just literally rolled up and they were there in the window. I was like, oh, there they are. And
oh my God.
Yeah, it was that sort of surreal thing where you're like, oh, you exist, and you yeah, there's this sort of, they are icons, and they are, I guess, this sort of modern day deities. I guess it's there's such a detachment because all you do is watch them. There's no interaction. Even if you think there's a bit of interaction on social media, again, it's you need the physicality, you need that sort of humanity to connect to. And yeah, it's surreal when anything kind of comes to physical fruition, because so much of what I do is digital. So yeah, like I've had some work projected up on stage, or you know, these sorts of things where you're like, oh wow, people are actually interacting physically with them, whereas you don't really, you kind of, yeah, you see a few likes or a few retweets, but you don't really know how that's hitting people. So yeah, to see it was very surreal, and the energy of the crowd was just so warm and so amazing, and it kind of didn't matter that the performance was a little shaky or anything like that. I think everyone was just so happy to be there and see it, because it like for me that record is so stunning. And yeah, I come back to it. I've come back to it more than any of his other stuff lately, just because of its, yeah, it brings a lot of emotions swirling in quite a satisfying, enjoyable way. Yeah, I don't know if I'm describing it right, but yeah, just having a giant crowd singing along to every word, every Cuddy hum, all that. It was pretty magic.
Was it after Camp Flog Gnaw you started working on the Lil Ye Land kind of teaser beta level of Kids See Ghosts?
That was before. It was weird. I had this sort of notion that I wanted to evolve the Lil Ye illustrated project into a game, and then I think it was he literally announced Kids See Ghosts. He just literally said Kids See Ghosts this date, and just the name of that album, I was like, that's like a perfect subject matter for a video game. I've literally got a kid, let's stick him in a spooky dungeon shining a torch at some ghosts, and yeah, it just sort of span out from there. And yeah, it sort of, it all landed quite perfectly. In the demo side of things, obviously going away working on the game, everything's happened in between, so it's not fallen. It hasn't got as much hype, I guess, behind it second time round, whereas I think it hit that wave so perfectly, and I think sort of fortune just fell on it so well, and the timing was great. But yeah, it's been a long project, that game.
Yeah, how did working on a game differ from kind of the static art that you're used to making?
I mean, I studied animation at college, so I have a certain background in it, but I've only recently kind of come back to it because it burnt me out a bit doing it then. I like the evolution, and I've always loved sort of the retro game aesthetic with the sounds and the sort of pixelated graphics, and I just thought it would translate really well, and conceptually, you know, you're basically just sort of remaking Mario or Sonic, and that was my kind of favorite game growing up. And yeah, I think it was, I can't, yeah, I mean, to be honest, my collaborator Liam McInroy did all of the wizardry. Like, I basically just gave him some sort of walk cycles, run cycles, and I don't know how he turned it into a game that you can play, but yeah, he did an incredible job. But yeah, it was a really interesting thing because, again, it was a collaborative project, which I don't usually collaborate with other people with my personal projects, so that was interesting, and sort of having that dialogue, and just any project, you want it to take a certain amount of time, but life gets in the way, and then stuff gets delayed, and some people aren't available, then the other person's not available, and yeah, it got drawn out longer than I would have liked. But as far as the end result goes, I'm so happy with it, and I'd love to do more in the future, because yeah, I felt like we did only sort of scrape the surface of what's potential, because obviously there's so much content to draw from, and so many new visual takes we could do with levels and characters and enemies and that sort of thing.
It would be a huge undertaking, but I like the idea of you doing kind of a Avengers build up of hip hop artist video games.
I would love to. Like, if there's any I don't know, investors out there that's yeah, that would be the dream. Like, I love sort of taking two things and just sort of smushing them together, because to me it just makes sense. It's like, video games are the biggest sort of consumable media in the world. Hip hop's the most popular genre of music in the world. Why aren't there more hip hop video games? And you know, why isn't there more response to hip hop visually, graphically, whereas something like Game of Thrones has millions of bits of fan art, whereas some of the biggest rappers in the world, they're not, I don't know, they're not seen as valid subject matter.
That's a really good point. I had a point where I was like, okay, I want to get like a really aesthetically cool Kanye poster that would go with a lot of the movie posters that I have. And I couldn't find anything. Like,
that's been a project like on my to-do list for almost as long as I've been doing Lil Ye, is doing sort of fun, graphic, sort of Saul Bass inspired, or those amazing movie posters, but taking on hip hop, taking up Kanye, because again, his stuff is so visual. His videos, they're so cinematic. It just makes sense. And again, people want that sort of thing. They want to show their interests in stylish and aesthetically pleasing ways, and it doesn't just have to be those sort of portraits made up of lyrics or little photos. I just remember the Bob Marley posters that were just made up of tiny little photos of him.
I had so many Bob Marley posters in college. Was it like that in the UK as well, or in uni?
I think so. You I don't think you're allowed in without a Scarface or a Bob Marley poster.
Yeah, that was my experience too. Like, just the same basic posters in everybody's room.
I think they give them out at orientation, to be honest.
Or I saw so many, I just like wrapped up mine, burned it.
Yeah.
Like, nope. What? I never. Funny. Do you have a favorite Kanye album?
Ooh, that's tough. Favorite album? Oh. That's really difficult. I have been musing on this because obviously this is a regular question, and it has kind of stumped me because I love so many elements of so many of his albums, and like I say, I consume his music almost as like this giant bulk. So obviously it gets a bit more abrasive around Yeezus, and I might sort of kind of wake up a little bit when On Sight comes on, as opposed to his previous offerings. But yeah, I think maybe Graduation. That's a tough one because I enjoy all of them for completely different reasons at completely different times in completely different moods. So at the moment, say Kids See Ghosts, I just love it because it's just like this little tight package that you can listen to in sort of less than 30 minutes, and it can just take you on this little whirlwind of sort of exploring emotions, and it ends in that like hopeful but also sad but also like, I don't know, yeah, there's something about Kids See Ghosts that's really resonating at the moment. But probably like, yeah, a go-to would probably be Graduation.
I used to be my least favorite when we started the podcast, which
really?
I feel absurd about now, because now the rankings are almost flat for me at this point, much in the way that you said that it just depends on like the time, the mood, and it just how the album's hitting at that time, to where now I put on Graduation and there's something just very dynamic and special about it. Especially, man, I love Getting to the Glory every single time I listen to the album. It's just so cathartic.
I'm just scrolling through Spotify now. I'm like, damn it, I should have probably said Dark Twisted Fantasy, or maybe it was. It's just like there's so much good stuff, and I don't know. It's they are so different, but the voice rings throughout. I think, yeah, they're just all really satisfying. It doesn't feel like there's a lot lost amongst them. Obviously, I think people have certain opinions on tracks like Drunken Hot Girls and those sorts of kind of throwaway ones, but I think they help make up the whole sort of fiber of it all.
Yeah, Oh, go ahead.
No, that's fine.
I was just going to say Drunken Hot Girls. That was the one when I was in college and I first was like, I'll give Kanye West a listen. I started with Graduation because that was the album that had just come out, and I remember getting Drunken Hot Girls. It was like, I can't deal with this.
No,
And
no.
then it was when we started doing the show that I realized how tongue-in-cheek Drunken Hot Girls was, especially related to Kanye's ego on the album.
Yeah.
And just the development of ego, where I was like, oh, this is supposed to be, except this isn't Kanye being like, this is how I feel about Drunken Hot Girls. It's this excessive egotistical version of Kanye on Graduation, who's becoming more and more of this negative persona. Like, this is a demonstration of that. And that made me appreciate the song way more.
Oh yeah, I mean the thing is, it's like you listen to music differently at different times of your life, and yeah, you know, when I was 12, 13, you know, you had Eminem and like that. You listen to that because you're, you know, angry, and you're like, oh yeah, he's swearing and my parents will hate it. And you know, you could listen to it as a 30-year-old and find completely different things and cringe at certain things that used to mean the world to you, or understand certain things that made you cringe. And I think that's the interesting thing about good art, is it ages in really interesting ways, and it kind of reflects back at you at different times in your life. Because yeah, you can kind of go, I remember where I was listening to this, or I love this album because of this song, but then the next song on the actual album's your favorite song ever, but you just never gave it the time of day because you were so caught up in that banger.
Yep. It can really, it's amazing how often we can judge an album by the singles and never realize like some of our favorite songs are going to be on the album itself till we actually go and take that listen. I'm guilty of that so often, just judging an album by the singles and not going through and being like, oh no, this is my favorite.
I almost avoid singles in their entirety now. Like I kind of feel like it's too people want to make a decision too quickly, and I think it's seeing how that single sits amongst everything else. And yeah, I'm usually quite happy just to wait for the album and not spoil it.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat, mostly because I just don't pay attention, and then the album's out and I'm like, oh great.
Yeah.
I'm never listening to radio, but even if somebody, I think with Kanye songs, I have to listen when they first come out. But with other things, like there's going to be a new Jaden Smith album at some point. It was actually supposed to come out today and didn't.
Okay.
But with that, I probably won't listen to any of the singles before I listen to the album.
No, yeah, I mean, you know, it's singles are for different things, and I don't listen to the radio. I don't go out to clubs. I don't need to know what's good or bad in the sort of zeitgeist. To just enjoy what I enjoy in my own time and at my own leisure. And I really like being in that position, like where you don't have to like anything. Whereas I think growing up, there's certain obligations for you to like or not like certain things depending on your environment. And yeah, I think that's where a few people get a bit lost as to what their actual opinions are.
Yeah, as a kid growing up, I didn't want to watch TRL every day, but I felt I had to watch TRL every day so I could talk about music videos and rankings with other kids in my class. And then there were songs where I was just like, oh yeah, I love that video. When no, and that almost never goes away unless you stop caring. Otherwise, you can still be caught up in that race to please everyone else.
But you know, you were just trying your best, and that's all you got to do.
That's very true. Well, I think we're at your last call, so now you have the uninterrupted time to say however much you want about whatever you want to close out the show. But I appreciate you coming on, and
thanks for having me.
Yeah, enjoy your last call.
Thanks. So I guess go check me out on Instagram and Twitter at Lil_Ye. I try to post as much as I can, but I've been doing it for 5 years, so if you haven't seen my stuff, just keep scrolling. I've just put out a Lil Ye Land video game, which is free to download on Android and Apple iOS. It's kind of an homage to all the fun little visuals, and it's just a bit of fun, really. Play it, don't get too frustrated because it's a little bit hard in the first level with the balloons. But yeah, hopefully you'll enjoy that and see all the fun little hidden Easter eggs I've put amongst it. What else? I've got a book of 99 problems that you can get, as well as prints, and I've got a Lil Ye toy as well. You can get that on my online shop at wordplay.com, spelt in a stupid way, so probably just search Lil Ye shop instead. And yeah, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure. I really enjoy the podcast, and hopefully everyone listening goes back and listens to all the other things and gets way too much information that helps you appreciate and enjoy the music of Kanye West all the more. Cheers.